Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Greene. I run the sales and account management for a company called Trax. I run our Americas region. A little bit about me. I came to Trax about 7 years ago through a company acquisition. I've been in the CPG technology industry for the better part of my career, and I sit in Denver, Colorado. Very excited to talk to everybody today, tell you a little bit more about how we are thinking about retail, how we're trying to stay kind of ahead of the curve in terms of trends and what we're seeing in the industry, and how we're really innovating our technology to come along with us. So, first thing, I'd like to walk everybody through what we view as the state of retail execution, key themes, trends, etc. Talk to you a little bit more about Trax solutions, how we are building our solutions to help play into these, walk you through a real world case study, and then talk a bit about where we are going from a company perspective, which very much aligns with what the market is calling for right now. So fundamentally, we at Trax feel in the most kind of blunt sense that retail execution is broken. There's a lot of different companies that are all going to market in the same way that they have for years and years and years. And as retail has been completely turned upside down with the pandemic, with changing shopper behaviors, with evolving technologies, we felt that and we feel that retail execution is very much in need of a facelift as well. We're hearing a lot of different things from a lot of different CPGs. Trax represents hundreds of CPGs globally. We are present in well over 70 global markets. And many of you probably know about us through our early adoption of image recognition technology. Through a lot of different, conversations and meetings with these big clients, we're hearing a lot of the same things, both in the United States and globally. And I want to share and kind of start with what that is. So first thing, labor is a nightmare. We know that between backroom inventory and keeping products on shelf, there just simply are not enough people in store to keep up with the pace of retail. We've also heard a lot that CPGs have what they're calling data analysis paralysis. I used to work for Nielsen, and almost everybody in the industry partners with either Nielsen or IRI Circana, where they get their single source of truth about what is selling in store. But where it gets more complicated is all the other data points that are around those POS sales that are really getting a lot of CPGs pause and causing kind of this fear of having almost too much information to react to. Also, retailers and CPGs, surprisingly, are still very blind to in-store execution. So there's inferences that are drawn based off of the data that I just talked to you about, but very few do a great job at understanding what's actually happening in retail. Those same companies are saying, assuming I can get the news about what's happening in the store, I want to actually be able to do something about it. And you can see that going back to the first point, it becomes very hard to do that when you don't have a labor force that is really firing on all cylinders. Same companies saying, I want to execute smarter, and also saying that to pay for retail execution, they need a very strong ROI story. There's a lot of frozen budgets. There's a lot of trade spend that is allocated and marked in certain places. And in order to do things differently at retail, you need to really prove your case. So in hearing all of this in the market and with our clients, we've really also addressed that through our solutions. But before I go into that, I want to talk to you about some major themes and trends that we're seeing and we believe are really going to be playing out into 2024. So first off, consumer spending continues. There's been a lot of debate around, are we going into a recession? Or are we already in a recession? But when we see, airplanes still being full and restaurants full as well, it's pretty clear that consumers are still willing to spend. Don't know if that's going to be the case for all of 2024, but that's certainly what our data is showing us right now. With that spending also comes a rise in consumer expectations, a very different consumer expectation than maybe was the case 3 or 4 years ago. I'll give you an example. When we are at our local Target, if that store has a product that's out of stock, there is really no thought around looking for the product right next to it and basically replacing that with whatever's on the shelf. We know that if a product is not there on the time that we want to buy it, we're probably not going to buy it. So you're seeing a lot of different retailers and CPGs do everything they can from an omni-channel perspective as well as in-store experience to keep a consumer engaged with their product and also keep that product on the shelf while they're there shopping for it. We're seeing a bit of a change in labor. As I mentioned, labor was a really tough point for a lot of companies over the last few years. And if you look at the recent Dollar General news, there's been a real alignment or maybe a realignment that retailers are starting to invest again in-store labor. They know that this is a key piece to the customer experience. And while it certainly is more profitable to be leaner on the labor side, there's an acknowledgement generally across both retailers and CPGs that we're starting to swing back in the direction of putting more people in store to help. AI. I'm sure everybody knows what AI is. It's taking a lot of different forms, especially within the space that we're in. And there's a general acknowledgement that AI is part of the consumer experience and can be used to really improve the consumer experience, whether that's with shoppers, whether that's with inventory replenishments, retail operations, and even CPG operations. And then also we've seen a very broad acceptance of what we call a hybrid route to market. This means that even the biggest DSD companies that are responsible for direct distribution of products and merchandising of those products are looking for help and looking and acknowledging that that there's different ways to put products on shelf and keep products on shelf. So taking all of that together, knowing that we're seeing these trends in the market and also what we're hearing from these CPGs, we'd like to think that Trax as a company thinks about retail execution very differently. So I want to talk to you about what that is. We have really three main pillars that our company is built on. And as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, the first pillar, measurement, is really what Trax, I think, in the market is known for. We were one of the first, if not the first in market back in 2009, 2010, to roll out image recognition at scale. And what is image recognition? Image recognition is simply going to a store, taking an image of a shelf or a display or any other condition, taking that photo back, processing everything in that photo, and then providing very meaningful, rich data about what's happening in that store. Now, there's a lot of different people in this market today. We are certainly not the only one that is in image recognition, but we would like to think that this is really the underlying structure or foundation of what our company is built on. And we're starting to see that play out across multiple other different services. And our customers are seeing a lot of value from that. The next pillar of our company is called the execution pillar or merchandising. And as I mentioned earlier, companies don't want us to just tell them what's happening in store. They want an ability to react to it and react to it very quickly. So Trax has an organic merchandising function called our Flex Force that enables CPGs to respond to in-store conditions faster and at scale across the United States than any other standard service provider or broker would be able to do. This is an on-demand service, all operating through an application on an iOS or an Android, and it crowdsources a bunch of different labor providers into one spot so we can do a fit-for-purpose action in a store to fix something that has an issue. And then the third pillar would be our shopper pillar. What our shopper pillar is an application that we call Shopkick. Shopkick is really a way to advertise to an engaged shopper while in a brick and mortar store, sending them to certain products on shelf, having them engage with these products on shelf, and really building a share of mind with that consumer, which is directly correlated to downstream purchases, downstream kind of brand activation, and making sure that not only can we attack the retail problem as a whole from an entire operations perspective on the left side with our measurement, but also engaging with day-to-day consumers as they're in-store shopping. And this is a little bit about what Trax is built on from a company perspective and how we are really structuring ourselves to advance with the trends that are happening in the marketplace. So I want to walk you through a real-world situation with a real-world client that brought to us a couple of key problems, and we'll talk about how we solve them and hopefully drive some thought starters around how we might be able to work with other CPGs that are listening to this recording. So the problem, like many different CPGs, this specific customer was fully reliant on the retailer for execution at store. They had made the decision years ago to pull out from any sort of retail merchandising spend and assumed and hoped that the retailer would continue to keep products on shelf in an effective and an engaged way, and therefore their sales would be moving in a more efficient manner. This same CPG company had an extremely seasonal surge coming up. It was part of the drink category, and they were very worried about Labor Day and the rush into stores around Labor Day because the temperatures in the United States were extremely hot, over 100 degrees in many parts of the US. So they needed to keep product there. They were seeing and feeling in their sales data, as well as just anecdotally, when people were going to stores, tons of out of stock incidents. And it was unsettling because the retailer basically wasn't able to do the job that they'd committed to. And they were having a really hard time managing the forecasting of inventory coming into the back room and really aligning that inventory with the shopper behavior and the patterns. And as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, they were stuck in analysis paralysis. They had so much data coming in about what was happening at stores. They weren't sure what to do with it. And were stuck in a spot where they were just not advancing like they needed to in a really key time. And what this was leading to was a real lack of leverage with the buyer at this specific retailer. They didn't have a good story to tell. They just had symptoms and anecdotes, and they enlisted Trax to help them out. What this all resulted in was a lot of lost sales during a very key period of time due to poor retail execution. So what did we do when we were having this conversation with this client? We really sought to answer three different questions. So where are their out of stock problems, and how frequent and how pervasive are they? We wanted to have a very large range of stores that we were getting in to measure these out of stock issues. And we wanted to tell them enough information that they could have a good conversation with their store buyer. We also wanted to figure out if they paid us to fix them, what was going to be the highest value in terms of outlets we were going to fix, and what would achieve the highest return on the investment for this retail execution spend that they had. Said differently, if they spent $1 on Trax services to help them out, what was the return that they were going to see in sales? And then third, how could we scale a retail execution service in a very efficient, almost a DSD-like format with a somewhat limited budget? And this goes back to the concept of a hybrid route to market, where we know that different customers are investing in different ways to put products on shelf. Some of them are being very creative with it, and they're all doing it under shoestring budgets to make sure that they can get the most execution out of the minimum amount of spend. So these three questions were what we entered our conversation with. And I want to talk to you about how we got them to an answer. So we used a concept that Trax is now fully in the market with, called signal-based merchandising. And what signal-based merchandising is it's a very different way to think about retail execution. And I would say is one of one in the marketplace right now in terms of this capability. And I want to anchor everybody on how this works using the three pillars that I just talked about that our company is built on. So let's go to the first step, signal generation. What is this? So a signal is our ability to get to a data point in the market about what's happening on shelf with a specific product in a very effective, efficient, and scalable way. How do we generate a signal? The first step is we took this customer's power SKUs and we put them into our shopper application that I mentioned on the previous slide called Shopkick. That then released these SKUs out to thousands of stores in the United States and interacted with over 1 million everyday engaged shoppers who are using this application to earn what we call kicks. Kicks are a virtual currency. It's a very gamified experience where if someone walks into a store, they're able to then find a product. They then scan that product, and that gives them points, essentially, which they can then redeem back for gift cards, for other perks and payment models. And so we put these SKUs into our app, released it to the entire United States in this chain, and basically had our shoppers go generate signals about where this product was showing up on shelf and where it was not showing up on shelf. We then worked with our client to identify within that sample of doors that we were going to get signals in, which stores mattered the most to them. We basically used their trailing sales data that they passed over to us and said, okay, this outlet represents this amount of sales when they're firing on full velocity. This outlet represents a different amount of sales. And we basically took that and created what we think of as a matrix of execution in those stores and sales or ACV of those stores, which then helped us determine which doors were highest priorities to service. Once we started generating a good heap of signals in the marketplace and we knew which stores represented higher velocity sales for the client, that then led us to a decision around, should we merchandise using our dynamic flex force a certain door? And if yes, what do we need to do in this store to continue to drive sales? Which is point number 3, we're calling shelf correct. Our flex force gets a signal from our command center. That command center says you need to hit this store. We know that that store has high sales velocity and poor out of stock index or execution issues, which probably means that if we go and we spend money servicing that door, the client will see an immediate lift in what happens in that visit. From there, our flex force rep then walks into the store. They work with the store manager. They enter the back room. They put orders in. They pack out shelves and they price things. And that all of a sudden turns that somewhat unhealthy situation into a much healthier store that is then churning sales in a key period of time. And sure enough, we saw a really nice bump in sales over this program that we ran. So I want to walk you through each of these steps in a little bit more detail. And then we'll talk about how this all relates to where Trax is going from a company perspective and how we think we can really help the marketplace. So the first one, signal generation. As I mentioned, we were covering about 1,200 stores nationwide that was determined to be part of the sample for this client. We were generating ongoing signals, as you can see in this demonstration here, in our Shopkick app using everyday engaged shoppers. And we were achieving these signals across these specific states in about 99% of the doors that were part of the sample. And sure enough, we identified that almost all of the stores had out of stock issues that were warranting the conversation about, should we fix that door or should we not? This is just an example, different category of what the Shopkick application looks like. A shopper will go into a store. They will then click scan from a product perspective. That scan then, once you buy the product, reads the barcode. Once that barcode is read, that puts kicks into your deposit or into your specific account, which you can then use for gift cards. And then it even allows you to purchase the product if you want to and submit a receipt for that purchase. And we incentivize our users to do that as well. So it's moving products as well. When we talk about the second step, once the scans or the signals are starting to come in from the market, this is what happens when our merchandising reps are in store. Basically, they're working on the overall health of that product, and they're putting in orders. They are fixing price tags on the spot. They are spotting out of stocks and restocking where they need to. They're working with the store managers to adjust the scanners, and many actions and activities happened over the period of this program. The exact number was about 2240 in terms of actions that were taken in the store to fix the product. Again, I mentioned this earlier. What our team does is every single week, we will reset the stores and we will look at the entire universe of what is having the highest out of stock issues that we're seeing in the market and what stores represent the most in terms of sales volume based off of the data that the client is working with us on and passing us. And that determines really 4 different quadrants of how we are managing our ongoing merchandising activities. There's an observe, there's an analyze quadrant, there's an activate quadrant, and then there's a triage. Obviously, number 3 and number 4 are the quadrants that we are playing in the most, where we are taking highest priority action with our merchandising team to fix the doors that are in these 3 quadrants. And ideally that then changes the sales volume that happens in those stores too. I want to go back to something I said earlier. This is a constantly calibrating and changing list. We use data science and team behind the scenes that really allows us to make sure that the value of the doors we are attending to is going to go the absolute furthest for our client. And this is where we really think of ourselves in a different way in terms of our merchandising ability and our scale of being able to run a process like this. And then last, as I mentioned in the key themes of CPGs right now, everyone that is investing in retail execution needs an ROI. So this is very much part of our ongoing process is we are starting with the end in mind. We're working with the client to understand specifically what ROI it is that they need to continue to invest in merchandising. And we are basically calibrating to get that and then some. We're also doing things like doing A/B tests where we are able to basically go look at out of stocks with the same signals across a control set and a test set, and then basically watching the sales velocity between the two change and making sure that we are seeing real impact, not just in terms of sales uplift, but also that we're seeing an ROI on the spend that they are giving us to go do merchandising in specific stores. And in this case, we saw a nice ROI, about a 3.8 to 1, meaning every $1 spent led to $3.8 of sales. And again, this is variable by customer, and specifically the methodologies that every customer CPG uses might be a little different from one to another, but the overall story was very strong here. And as we wrap this up and kind of think back on what was the real efficiency of this process, what were we able to do? We were able to look at thousands of stores using our market signals and really only invest in fixing and merchandising the stores that mattered the most to drive the highest amount of sales lift. And if I go back to the comment that I made earlier about many customers investing in a hybrid route to market model, it is not an abnormal thing for a customer to have a certain sample of stores that are serviced by their own sales reps in a DSD portion, and then another sample of stores that are used through a service provider like an Advantage or an Acosta or a Crossmark, and then another set of stores that are fully reliant on retail execution to be done by the retailer, and then another set of stores that have project-based work that we can execute in specifically, markets and regions. And a lot of customers are doing this, and we view an approach like we just walked through as a really cost-efficient way to manage and keep eyes on stores that do not have ongoing continuity and bodies in them as part of that specific CPG's route to market, so that you're not just going blind on stores where you're not investing in retail execution. Rather, you're investing in a really smart way. And really, the next steps with this client and any client like this is, as I go back to kind of the three pillars of Trax, assuming that we are able to manage and control the out of stock issues at scale through a program like I just discussed, this is where it starts getting really cool, where you start using those same people that are in store to merchandise to then collect images and audits of that shelf and process through our image recognition technology. And we're also moving to the spot where our everyday shoppers that are in the store, even generating the signals, are now starting to use on-device image recognition to help gather an even robust, stronger data set in the field upon the initial signal generation. There's also, constant ways that you can calibrate and optimize your route to market based off of the technology being part of your core program in terms of keeping projects on, or in terms of keeping your products on shelf. And really the opportunities are somewhat, endless in terms of how you can use image recognition, flexible merchandising, and then everyday shopper activation to help really expand your value in stores. So with that being said, I want to spend a few minutes just talking to you about our innovation path. Again, I go back to the fact that our company started as an image recognition company, and I want to be really, really clear that we believe, and we have a lot of evidence that we are the best in class at that. But that is not where our technology roadmap stops, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So imagine a world where our everyday shoppers are scanning the shelf versus walking to a product and simply scanning a UPC. They're using Trax's image recognition technology to basically walk down an entire aisle. And then we have all of the data of all of the different SKUs that are on that aisle, what that category looks like, what the competition looks like, and anything else that you can really glean from image recognition. The key difference of this today versus the Trax of tomorrow is that our goal is to make this experience super simple, super decentralized, and it almost seamless to collect data in store, whether it is through an everyday shopper using the Shopkick app or through someone that is a sales rep using the Trax image recognition technology. And what this looks like is our ability to collect even more signals in the marketplace and react in an even smarter way to the stores that need it the most. And where it also gets cool is once this is happening somewhat organically, we can then have real conversations about how do you steer a consumer towards a certain purchase and how do you advertise to them in a very personalized way. Now, I want to be clear, we're not there yet, but we are actively building the technology to support this type of process at scale and ultimately become smarter and smarter about how we are merchandising and how we are coaching our CPGs to merchandise. This would then produce some really key metrics, whether it's for a sales rep, whether it's for someone at headquarters. Not only would they have the benefit of image recognition and processing all this data, but they'd also know where they need to react to it. And ideally, they'd be using us and our merchandising workforce to help them with that in a very agile way. So I'll really end with this. What does that mean for CPGs? This means that this technology stack, we're talking about it living in Shopkick as kind of our current state. And that's a really cool step in advance to kind of the future of data collection, having a bunch of everyday shoppers collecting this at scale. But we also see a world where we could be using this technology embedded in a lot of other consumer applications, whether that is retailer applications themselves, whether that is an app like a Vivino app, which many people use for selecting the wine that they want and basically validating the taste and the price and the quality, et cetera. Really, the opportunities are endless, but our technical roadmap and the progress that we're on from a company perspective is really centered around collecting as much data as we can in field in a really seamless way, creating as many signals as we can in the market, whether it's through us, whether it's through our shoppers, whether it's through our partners, to make you really smart about merchandising in an appropriate and a highly efficient and effective way. And that leads to a couple different things, right? It leads to understanding of store indexes. So POSM, out of stock metrics, the number of facings, compliance against certain execution, price availability, product availability, display availability. And this really represents us, or it represents itself in a couple of different products that we have, but also many that maybe we don't have today. And our number one goal is to power your brands with as much data and as much real-time data as we can in the marketplace. And that's a lot about where we are going from a company. We want to make sure that all of our CPGs have a competitive advantage, that they're smarter with their spend, with their trade dollars and with their merchandising dollars, and that they use Trax technology as really kind of part of that at its core. And with that, thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity to present.